Like those pictures. Did you take that?
No, Troy took this one.
That's nice.
Yeah, that one. I just posted them.
All right.
He started stalking.
Okay, we are up on YouTube Live. Did you take that?
No, Troy took this one.
That's nice.
Yeah, that one.
All right. Okay, we are up on YouTube Live. Did you take that?
No, Troy took this one.
That's nice.
Yeah, that one.
All right. We are up on YouTube Live. Send me. Yeah, send me one that doesn't give too much detail away. Send me. Well, send me one that doesn't give too much detail away. Interesting. Figure out how to get this. Hi there. Oops, got it backwards. Oh no, there we go. So how do I get my camera to work? All right, there we go. We can get a little bit of this, but man, it's not great, Edward. I'll tell you.
I think maybe we'll. I think we should just do the close-ups with the gimbal, but maybe just I can just explain the glow in the dark and like
And we'll give it a try.
give it a
Let's get
try and
feeling.
explain that. Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
It's quite hard to see on a
Okay.
So yeah, I think that'll be fine. I'll just explain it and then I'm gonna upload pictures as well to show you.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
Testing. Hello, testing. Oh, okay. For some
Check. 1, 2. Hey, Sophie. We're going to start in 5 minutes here. All right, well, let's get started. We have a couple of folks. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait 2 more minutes. We all good, Edward? Feeling good?
Good. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the support there, Missy.
All right, let's go. It's just I'm zooming in, so we can watch. At least we can watch on full screen, unlike Instagram.
Yeah,
you're unmuted, by the way.
Oh,
bring
sorry.
it on, Missy. Let's go. I like that. She's like, let's go.
Hi, hi Eddie. I love you.
So great.
I like Zoom better.
All right, well, let's get started. What do you say? Hey, everybody, welcome. My name is Lars, and I serve as Executive Director for Artisans Asylum. We are a 42,000 square foot makerspace in Somerville, Massachusetts. We are moving to Alston Brighton in 2022. And Part of that move involves getting to know the Alston Brighton community. And to do that, we have set up an annex here in Alston Brighton. That annex is a place for experimentation and play, and ultimately getting to know artists and makers and entrepreneurs here in Alston Brighton, with whom we'd love to work in the future. And I'm really excited that our artist in residence program has introduced us to Edward Perkins, who has been with us for the last 30 days. He proposed the idea of taking his maximalist collages and making them larger. So I am thrilled to introduce Edward Perkins, a visual artist originally from Florida, moved here in 2017, who works across many medium, including film and video, and also collage. And so I'm going to hand it over to Edward. He's going to talk a bit about his experience here, the works that he's produced, and then we're going to dive into some Q&A. So thanks for joining, and take it away, Edward. You're on mute, bud.
All right. Thank you. So my name is Edward Perkins. I'm a non-binary artist living in Alston, near Boston, Massachusetts. I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida, and I lived there until 2017 when I moved to Boston to start mass art for my graduate degree. I work across several mediums. I started in film and video with analog 16mm filmmaking, and I've since moved into altered imagery, collage work. I also do resin earrings, as well as some beadwork, and I've dabbled in several types of mediums, and I definitely don't confine myself to one of those. So originally, my background is in film theory. So my bachelor's degree is in cinema studies. So for me, like as an artist, I really started off, I didn't really consider myself to be an artist, I guess, at first is what I'll say. I considered myself to be more of like a critic, in that I was interested in looking at artworks and then writing about them and responding to them. And then towards the end of my bachelor's, I actually ended up beginning to become a maker and actually make my own work as well. And I think that my background in theory and criticism is pretty evident. And I think it's like kind of a logical step that I ended up working in appropriated imagery and collage. So then once moving to Boston and starting mass art in my graduate degree, I really delved into my 2D work with collage, and I started off making like hybrid works that were kind of smaller, like generally ranging in like the 11 by 13 type range. And then they were often rephotographed and reprinted larger. And I would put them through like several iterations of being photocopied and then reprinted and resized as well. And then I did like an independent study with Steve Locke while I was at Mass Art, and he really helped me kind of like refine and look at like the way that my queer sensibility can be translated into my work, and the way that queer people before me have used collage. So I was introduced to people like Jess Collins and stuff like that. And I started looking into the maximalist style of making. My earlier film work was like very stroboscopic and like rapid cutting and stuff like that. So I feel like the maximalism in my collages is pretty like, it makes sense to me, because I think that the stroboscopic films and rapid cut films are very much about maximalism and about inundation of information and the way that we perceive information and register information, especially when it's presented to us in like a problematized or like a difficult way that's abstracted. So then I started off with like hybrid collage mostly, but lately I've actually decided that I've mostly doing wood panel collages using all of original imagery. So I guess to clarify, with my hybrid works, I was really hesitant about using the actual like photographs, like because I was using gay vintage magazines, and I was like kind of holding them, and I was like worried about like cutting it up and like being unhappy with what happened with it. But I think that as I've practiced more and more and just honestly gotten better at cutting and collage work, that I started finding the benefit in actually having the real photograph or the real image there. So in terms of my materials, I'm often using discarded type of books or photographs, in that I go to places like the Bristol bookstore, where they have an outdoor section that has $1 and $5 books. And so I'll usually buy stuff there, or I also buy discarded family photos online in lots. And that's like another interesting part of my process, I guess, because with buying materials in that manner, I'm especially like online, I'm not always sure what I'm getting. So I like oftentimes will just be buying these groups of 100 photographs and only see 10 of them before I actually make the purchase and receive them. But then I like actually like looking through those and then finding something unexpected, and then, or maybe even finding something amazing that I really wasn't expecting would be in there. And so I feel like for me, a lot of my process is about looking at these items and ephemeral materials, more specifically, and ephemeral media, and then kind of, I'm like, I guess conceptually, I'm interested in like power dynamics and in power structures within the media, but I like to explore those power dynamics by disrupting the media and by ripping it apart and kind of taking it out of its original context and trying to push it into something new. And I feel like, especially being non-binary, I have kind of like a unique perspective on looking at media, especially vintage media, because it's so heavily gendered, and it was in a time frame that was so, the binary was so dominant. I don't think that there was really any, I don't even think people fathomed the idea that that stuff could be questioned or called into question. So I feel like my perspective gives me like this interesting way of being able to, I feel like it's almost like a way, like a tangential relationship, or like a half relationship that I share with images. Like I relate to the image of like a man or a woman, but I don't fully relate to it. And in fact, in a lot of it, I actually feel alienated. So I think that I kind of use that stance and that emotion to try to rebuild something with these pieces. And I think a lot of that process is kind of about exploring my own self and where I fit into these images and the function of these images when they're in my hands now and in this time. So that's like generally the viewpoint of that. And lately, with doing the wood panel collages, I've begun to think about wanting to expand and trying to make work that's larger. So I was having conversations with my best friend, Julian, and they were advising me that maybe I should consider doing some large scale collages. They wanted me to do like 2-story high wooden collages, which unfortunately was not possible at this time. But in the midst of thinking about this, I ended up seeing a post on Instagram for Artisans Asylum, and it was explaining how they were providing space to people in Alston and artists that wanted to work. So I figured that would be a great idea to actually explore working on this larger scale. So over the course of 30 days, I've made 2 large-scale collages. I've also made about 18 overpainted photographs and a few solar printed sweaters and stuff. But tonight, I mostly want to talk about the collage works. So I've decided to call the series of these 2 collages Fractal Landscape. And they're pretty much looking at some feelings that I think a lot of people might be able to relate to in the pandemic. They're kind of like, they can be about restlessness or about feeling kind of trapped. So the first collage that I started is called The Secret Garden. And that collage, it has kind of like a little backstory to it. So basically, when I was probably like 10 or 11, my sister and I went to Georgia or Atlanta, Georgia to go visit my grandmother. And we were staying for like about 5 days. And she pretty much like only had like a croquet set and like 4 DVDs. And we played croquet for about like 5 hours the first day, and then we're extremely bored with that. So we ended up looking through these DVDs, and the only ones that we wanted to watch, because like there was like a lot of them were like MASH and like stuff like that. And so we found The Secret Garden and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And over the next like 4 to 5 days, like we actually just literally watched those 2 movies like back to back to back to just pass the day, to just like make the time go faster. And so this story like came back to me when I was thinking about what we're doing nowadays. I mean, with the pandemic and with the quarantine, like we kind of have a justification for binge watching and for just getting sucked into a film or into a media, so that we can forget about our present state. And so it's interesting that the pandemic has like presented this in a way where it could be like kind of like a good thing to just like mindlessly like watch stuff to pass the time because you're, you know, doing good by staying inside. But so the Secret Garden collage is definitely about like that appeal of the relief of looking at something and getting lost in a film, and like the way that you can be so immersed in a media that it numbs you to the circumstances around you and to the pain that you're also experiencing. And so the way that I represent this is with like a weird composition that kind of has, at the bottom, there's like several onlookers, and they're kind of appearing to look at like this large structure that's like a woman's head that's kind of has these like tendrils going about it. And so I kind of have like that woman's head or the large figure in the center of the collage is representative of like I was trying to represent spectacle and represent mass media as kind of this collection of beautiful images that are made in a way that can be kind of off-putting or scary or like uncanny in the way that I've cut them. And so, and then the second collage is actually, the 2 collages are pretty much like different states, I would say. So the second collage, which I've titled Fractal Landscape, is pretty much representing the restlessness and the anxiety that leads you to the Secret Garden collage. So in a way, the fractal landscape is kind of the energy and the feeling and the restlessness that you experience before you eventually, you know, decide that you need to tune out or zone out to some movie or some type of TV show. So that's pretty much like the general idea for those 2. But the process ended up obviously being, you know, a lot different than working on a smaller scale, because in this situation, especially like the gestural painting that I do was on like a much larger scale. I'm used to, you know, using like a small palette knife and like very meticulously going over like an 8-inch by 10-inch photograph. And so in this instance, with these 4 feet by 3 feet collages, I had a lot more room to really like kind of like whip my arms around. And I actually used like a squeegee, the thing that you use to like clean a window, to apply some of them. So that was definitely different, but I also feel like this scale was almost like fitting for my style. I like to have pretty complex compositions within my collages, and I actually kind of usually feel a little bit limited by the space and the area of the collage. But I think that working at this scale, I kind of felt like it was almost just right for the maximalism that I enjoy. And then speaking of the maximalism, the 2 different collages use maximalism in different ways. Like the Secret Garden collage is much more apparently maximalist in that the images are very layered and they're disrupted and it's very just heavy. There's so much imagery, it actually can be difficult to see what is what at certain times. Whereas the other collage, the fractal landscape collage, uses the negative space a little bit differently. I have we're gonna try to show later, but I used a lot of glow in the dark vinyl adhesive for these collages. So both of them have some glow in the dark elements, but Fractal Landscapes has several glow in the dark abstract cut shapes that are actually hidden within the negative space of the collage. So it's almost like kind of like a concealed maximalism for that one. And I feel like as a series, I think that they do well like next to each other because I think that they represent like, you know, for like state 1 and state 2, I would say that we feel like we're bouncing between. But I do kind of feel like they could actually be, you know, shown on their own and still have some type of merit. But that's about it. I mean, for the 2 collages, we're gonna open it up for questions as well. So I think that Lars might have a few questions for me, and then we're also gonna take questions from you guys as well.
Hey, Edward, thanks. Do you want to do a quick up close tour of?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we can do this.
Yeah. So we'll do, we're gonna kind of show like a close-up view of the collages. All right, let me make sure I'm not muted too. Okay. So I don't know if you all can see, it's under Alicia Reinert's camera, but so this is the Secret Garden collage. As you can see, as I was explaining, that kind of starts, there's like the bottom row, I would say, is kind of like the foreground of the collage with like the people looking onward. There's the structure in the middle, and then some stuff going along the sides. And in addition, yeah, I don't know if you can see, but there's also actually flowers and imagery that's on the side of the collage as well. So I was kind of trying to reference the frame again, as well as like a space of illusion. And then here we have, this is Fractal Landscapes. Oh yeah, and you can actually, so the title is right there, and it's kind of hard to see. That piece, the Fractal Landscape piece is actually, it was a paper that I had from a girl named Janelle who was in my collage group. She had given me some images to use, and I've had that for 2 years.
Anything else you want to say about these?
I don't know. I think I'll open it up to questions if that's cool.
All right, great. All right, we are going to try and do this. All right, I think we're good. Thanks everyone for joining us for that walkthrough. Edward, thank you for being a part of the Artisans X residency. You know, as a fellow collage artist, I'm thrilled to see you working through this challenge of how do you go big. I've wrestled with that in going from small postcard size, you know, little 4x5s to sculpture, and then, you know, encountering. How we doing, Alicia? We're okay?
Yeah, just during the close up, like when it was on the phone, the image wasn't working on YouTube.
Ah, got it. Thanks. And so I'm inspired by artists like Mark Bradford as well, in case folks who also are familiar with sort of where collage is going, and scale is certainly something that I think is important. So tell me a little bit about, first of all, just your experience. Like, how does your material and how does the object, let's say the cutout piece of paper, relate to scale differently? How did you have to adapt in order to fill up so much more of your canvas in a way that still contains your voice? What was that process like? What did you learn about sort of your materials and process, and where you want to take that going forward?
Yeah, I feel like the scale differences were, I mean, it becomes pretty apparent during when you're working with collage, especially because you're kind of stuck with a fixed size for the image. Like the magazine is going to be the size that it is. So I feel like one thing that was good was I was actually able to use a lot of my oversized images, or like larger images that were actually like a little bit too big for like an 11 by 14 collage. So that was like a benefit, but then there was also the challenge of like, I mean, you really had to, like it really became like Legos. It was pretty much just building and building. I feel it was definitely had to be more complex, and you had to think about it more like structurally and how to create something out of like several pieces rather than just using two or three to create a form that can like dominate the whole collage. So I think it was a lot about motif and about repetitive types of imagery. So like using like the flowers, or for example, or on the fractal landscape, there's a lot of repeated imagery that is about like brickwork and like buildings and stuff like that. So I think creating those visual motifs that work and translate, and also, I mean, motifs that you can actually make, because you know, I have like a book full of flowers or stuff like that. So motifs that you can make by finding similar imagery. That was kind of like the way that I was working through, you know, how to make something that large, or how to make something stand or have meaning when it's on a collage with like 100 other images.
Right on. One of the things I notice about your work is it's very fluid. You don't take the approach of cutting outlines around your figure, or you're not literal in how you approach your subject that's cut out. Can you talk a little bit about how you shape the pieces of paper that are then applied into these larger series of what I would think of as really ebullient flow?
Yeah, I definitely have like a lot of, I'd say that I'm really influenced by a lot of Eastern art, and I think more specifically in the way that Japanese art represents like smoke or clouds. I've always been like particularly interested in that type of image, and also the way that like the sea could be represented, and like those kind of swirling forms that are like not necessarily rigid, or more fluid. So I don't know, I guess when it comes to the choices in my cutting, I mean, I would say that I was definitely influenced by Jeremy Hetherington, is a collage artist that I was in a show with, and I saw he does a lot of those like abstract cutting. There's a collage artist named Maximatic who also does those kind of maximal abstract cuts. But for me, it's also that I'm, to be completely frank with you, I'm not like super precise handed. So like, I'm not like the best at, there's some collage artists that can cut out like an entire tree with all of the branches and leaves. And I'm not like that. I can't really be that delicate with my work. I'm just too heavy handed. So I kind of like, that's like kind of what led me to creating these abstract shapes. But I find that really what I do is just a lot of practicing. I mean, I honestly just like sit on my couch sometimes and just cut these shapes for like hours, and I just have like a bag of them, and then I kind of end up using them to like as little pieces to create like a larger form. And often, you know, going and recutting some of those pieces to make them fit better, or stuff like that. But I think it's just I don't know, it's just getting a pair of scissors and just kind of going with the flow and the feeling of it. I mean, it's definitely like a direct way of working, I would say. Like I have a little bit of like a conceived idea of what shape it will be, or like I need it to fit in this corner or whatever. So I could definitely, like, I have a little bit of an idea, but a lot of it is just kind of like responding and just kind of like cutting and feeling and responding to that shape.
Right on. So my last question is something that I've been thinking quite a bit about in terms of sort of the artist's stance with relationship to larger social trends, to society, right? So we've all come through COVID together, and I really appreciated one of the things you were talking about, which is like, how do we cope, together through all this, differently and together? One of the things that I'm struck by is, I would like to hear you comment a little bit on, is there a relationship that you feel like maybe the public, all of us who haven't lived the experience of being queer, LGBTQ in America, that perhaps is now an opening as a result of going through isolation, trying to be creative when you feel outside of perhaps the larger social contract? You see what I'm trying to say? Like, are we in a better position to accept and understand and really value and come to love queer art in a new way as a result of going through COVID together?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I guess, to be honest, I haven't really made that connection before, but I definitely feel like a lot of people feel kind of isolated, or like they feel like they're not a part of like this larger, the larger happenings of the world. And I think that that is definitely a position that I think someone could probably like see some relation to feeling like an outsider, or feeling like you're not necessarily participating in society. So I think that people, that could be in a position where people might be more receptive to understanding that feeling. I think it just, it could depend on the person, but I think that people are kind of being forced to sit with themselves a little bit nowadays. Like, you kind of have to be with yourself. And I think that also is actually leading to a little bit of, like, people maybe are having to do some self-reflection and self-work. I mean, we're seeing things like mental health issues, like, kind of going up and stuff. So I think that people are kind of like seeing inside of themselves a little bit more. They're being forced to kind of sit with themselves in a way. And I think it's uncovering some things about ourselves that maybe people didn't know. So I definitely think that it could put people in a situation where perhaps they can empathize with feeling like they're disconnected.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope that for the arts world as a whole, LGBTQ artists, BIPOC artists, that there's going to be some empathy opening up and a new appreciation of the work and the struggle that often lies behind that flat surface that we just come to appreciate, once it's in a big global gallery or something like that, and we've lost sense of the human journey that got it there. But let's open it up to our friends online. There's a question from Missy Hannah that says, how is moving from digital to the wood medium for you? Do you miss your digital formats, or are you enjoying both mediums? Can you talk a little bit about that transition?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in certain ways, like, I do miss digital, and I haven't necessarily like written it off. Like, I'm not, I still do like a little bit of digital works every now and then. Like, I did, I had a virtual show that I did, and I made like a wallpaper that was digital. It was a digital collage still, but I mean, I'd say that I think that there's a really good benefit to using digital collage work or working in the digital medium, especially if you don't have the means to like work a lot, or to be able to just like buy a bunch of wood panels and like work on wood a lot. Or if some people don't even have the space. I mean, that was actually kind of what led me to starting to use the original materials. Was I was like hoarding all of this materials and then printing copies, and then I was just running out of space. So I mean, like the cool thing about the digital world is like you can have a hard drive with thousands. I mean, my hard drive, I document, I still photocopy a lot of the images that I use. So like I have hard drives with like thousands and thousands and thousands of images. So there's definitely like I don't know, it has a lot of benefits of especially just being easier to work with and faster. And like, I think when you're trying to like study composition, especially, that can be something that the digital realm is good for. I think that also there's artists working in the digital medium that completely fascinate me, that are really interesting. I mean, there's a digital collage artist that is like Spork Fine Art is like their Instagram handle, but they do like these really complex digital works. So I think that there's benefits to it, but for me personally, being that my work is so interested in like texture and in the degradation or altering of the material and the materiality of it, that working with the actual material on wood was just, I think it was just more like where that work aligns. I feel like when I was creating my hybrid collage works, I feel like a lot of people didn't appreciate that I was like actually still cutting all of that stuff out and that it did exist, but I'm just like scanning it and reprinting it. So I think that people kind of appreciate your work a little more when it's like when they can see the actual paper and that evidence is there. But yeah, I don't necessarily like miss that type of working as much. I mean, I still do it a little bit, but I would say that for right now, I'm pretty content with working with wood panel.
It's really fun to think about collage in the digital world and collage physically, because one of the things I struggle with is the ability to gain transparency so easily in the digital world. Whereas, you know, when we're working with physical paper, we have to experiment with removing top surfaces or applying some kind of penetrating finish that will bring out, you know, what's behind it. So it's really interesting. We just have to work so differently. There's another question that kind of relates to Missy's question from Sophie, when she says, you know, when you're gathering materials, do you have any sense of what the final composition is going to look like, or does the final image really sort of evolve as you're working? How do you navigate that tension between sort of planned and thoughtful, like here's what I need to say, versus the process and the materials that sort of guide you to those happy accidents, as it were?
Yeah, I would say it depends, but overall, like most of my works, I would say that I don't have a general compositional idea when I begin making it. So, but then, however, there are several other ones where I like immediately knew what this was going to be and like I created it. But I would say like probably 80% of the time, I'm not going about it that way. Like I usually just begin working on something, and I'd say that it usually has like a starting point. Like there's usually like an initial composition of like about 3 or 4 images. In The Secret Garden, it was like the woman's face that I started with. So like I have this like piece that like I'm like happy with, and then I kind of like build off of that. But overall, I would say that I'm much more like fluid and open while I'm creating work. Like I definitely I like to like look at something and then respond to it, even my own work. So like I look at it as like, what is the collage like wanting to become, not necessarily what, you know, I don't know. You have to kind of inspect whether it's like, is this what I wanted? And even if it isn't what I really wanted, it might be what's working in the collage. And I'm definitely not like the type of person that is averse to that. Like, I think sometimes I have this idea and then it ends up like completely changing over it. So I'm very open. But when I'm gathering materials, like I would say that, you know, there's definitely like, I'm thinking formally about some of them. Like for instance, like when I bought the brickwork, like I was aware that like I have a brickwork, it's a bunch of like houses and stuff. And, you know, I'm aware that those type of drawings tend to be very heavily perspective, and that, you know, you can use like the angles of the buildings to kind of create like a confusing space. So like I'm thinking of like the functional like way that the book or the material that I'm buying will work. but I'm not necessarily viewing the final composition. But with the overpainted photographs or like my swipes, I would say that actually for most of those, I do pretty much know like what area of the photograph I'm going to paint or what like I'm going to obscure with it. But obviously with like with the paint pouring, like there's so much of that that is completely unpredictable and like unexpected. But I would say that I go into those with like a lot more of a clear plan for what I want to cover, and especially what I don't want to cover, I think is also important.
Let me put on there. Let's get close up to these again one more time. Sorry, I gotta manage all these cameras. This is kind of exciting. I'm gonna stop that video. So we're up with this video. Can folks see? Do we have Alicia up here? Not yet. Hang on one second. We're gonna do this. All right, there we go. So here we are. We're getting close. Can we see there? I want to talk a little bit about this picture here. And so this is Secret Garden. Remind me of the name for this one?
Fractal landscape.
Okay, Fractal landscape. So in Secret Garden, there's a lot more work going on. Like this is almost like a standalone piece within a larger piece, and then that piece is obviously within a larger because of the order frame. Is that sort of like 3 levels? Maybe there's even more levels of relief. Was that intentional? Do the borders and the strong walls mean something in relationship to human boundaries or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in this specific collage, I would say that the separation of the elements is definitely like indicating distance, like especially the people on the bottom, on that bottom row are definitely the foreground, and they're supposed to be like separated from the rest of the composition. But a lot of my work as well is done with like multiple layering. So I'm like, I kind of like create something and then go over it. Sometimes without a complete intentionality beforehand. I guess that might not make sense. But so what I'm saying is that like I create an entire layer and then just start going over it sometimes without necessarily thinking beforehand what I'm going to cover or what will be covered. And I feel like that produces distinct layers that feel separated from each other. There's like a tension amongst those layers. And I think that that's like what is going on there is there's like, there's almost like a moment where you can see the parts where I've stopped and kind of did something else. And I think that that's like, it's like a way of just positing more and more stuff on top of each other. So it's like how it's building on top of one another.
Yeah. There's a lot of hands in the middle here. And then there are fewer as you work your way out. What's the relationship to hands, women, and the Secret Garden?
Yeah, so the specific, like, there's definitely like a motif of like hands that are going on in there. And I think that because that specific part of the Secret Garden is talking about, that's like the piece that's supposed to represent like the spectacle itself, or like the media that is so enticing. And so I think about like those close-ups of hands is like, I'm thinking about, I guess, like the sensualness of the image, like the lusciousness, or like the sense of touch and that sense of like delicacy and beauty that is so like refined and like hyper, it's like hyper real in the way that, and this is, a lot of this is like 1940s imagery, or like Hollywood imagery. So it's like high studio production, and it's very like, you know, it's just like luscious and like high. And I think that I wanted to use that to kind of represent that, like the beauty and the softness, but to have that be in juxtaposition to like the uncanniness of the shape, or the unsettlingness of the shape.
let's just check here if we have a few other questions that have come in. Any new medium, asks Missy Hannah, that you're interested in exploring next?
I'm not 100% sure. I started doing some beaded earrings. So I've been doing a little bit of that. And I don't know. I think for right now, just mostly the collages, and also the resin earrings are something that's probably my newest venture. And I've definitely been, I'm going to be doing more of that. And I'm actually going to have a sale on my earrings next week too, if anyone who's here is interested.
I think there's a slight follow-up to that, which is there a new series by theme or topic that you're kind of ready to take the new format and explore?
I do have another series that's kind of in the works, but it's just still kind of like early, I guess I would say, in terms of the stages. But I'm going to be doing like a series of like portrait photographs, because I have some additional portrait photographs of like 1940s Hollywood images. And so I'm thinking I want to do, I'm going to do a series of those, but using like glitter and iridescent like paint and stuff on top of these portraits of like women, but like with a bunch of glitter and like strange stuff over their face. And I've been really trying to like use a spirograph, which is like those like little toys like that you like draw in a pen in like a circle and it makes those weird like geometric patterns. I've been trying to like learn how I can use that in my art, and I'm like having a little bit of trouble because like I wanted to originally I was thinking about taking those glamour portraits and then doing a spirograph with like a metallic pen over the portrait and having like these what would be called like a faceless portrait style, but using the spirograph. But unfortunately, I just like have not been able to get it to work. So I'm thinking I might do something a little different. But yeah, I think this new series is going to be using it's like these large oversized books too. I think they're like 18 inches. So they're quite large. And I'm going to be using those for a series.
Right on. So one more question for you here about your process. I've taken the liberty of putting one of your, I don't know if it's practice or just alternative, what do we call these when you take the photographs?
Swipes.
Swipes.
Yeah.
So on these swipes, I don't know if folks can see there's a little bit of glare, but one of the things I really love that Edward does is they obscure detail and focus the eye on certain details, like in this case, the feet and the light on this. Beautiful. I noticed that you kept the swipes off of the surfaces of these two works. All of the paint, the acrylic medium is in the back. Was that intentional? And can you talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea of adapting the process as a result?
Yeah, so a lot of my works, I would say, like lately, especially, I have one called Reinterpreting an Elusive Past that is kind of a similar one where like I painted like a background and then collaged on top of that. So, I mean, I definitely like consciously went into this collage saying like I'm going to use an abstract painted the swipes as like more of like a background element that will then be collaged on top of. But that's different because in a lot of my other works, like I am using the paint on top of, well, behind and on top of the collage works. But I think for this one, I just, because of the scale, I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more of like a background to kind of like imply a space and then have the figures and the objects be on front of it. Some of the works I enjoy doing the paint on top of, but I feel like that definitely starts to muddle a lot of the shapes, and you have to like be really, really specific and intentional when you're doing that. And so I think because I wanted these forms to be so large and so present, I just didn't really feel like the painting on top of them would be appropriate. But it is different because obviously with like my with the swipe works, it's like the complete opposite, where it's like the photograph and then the paint is what's singularly on top of it, rather than the paint with the photographs on top of these ones.
Here. All right, we have another question that came in where one of our viewers asked about the eyes and noticed that in almost all cases, the eyes have been removed from the female subjects. Not on the side images necessarily, but the ones that are sort of more central. Was that intentional? And what is the sort of the meaning behind the eyes portraits?
Yeah. So I guess I found out like recently that I guess the name of that is like a faceless portrait, and that's definitely something that I'm interested in personally, as well as in my work. But I feel like, especially in glamorous or in like beauty type of imagery, that removing the eyes or obscuring the eyes it just creates a different type of response, where I feel like you become almost a little bit like defensive in a way, or like it makes you feel like uncomfortable because you're like something's looking at you and you can't look back at it. So I feel like it removes like the intense context of the image and kind of allows you, like opens up the space for you to like project into, like to either project into it or to also project the face to become something other than what it actually is. Like it can become indicative of like an idea or an emotion rather than the literal like representation of the person's face.
So we have one more question here. How has working with the Artists as an Asylum influenced your work?
Well, I mean, definitely having like a creative space where I can, you know, work with has been like amazing. I mean, that's definitely been influential, and having support. I mean, to be honest, like being supported to make my work is definitely something that I don't always get. So I feel like having this opportunity, like kind of, it affected my process, because a lot of my work, I'm kind of just like loafing about and like just making my collages. Like I'm not necessarily working on a timeline, and I'm also just working within my room. So I have a lot of works that like, you know, are half done that just kind of like sit there for a long time. So being able to work here and having like a deadline and having like a reason to finish has been like definitely made me work faster, and also kind of made me, I feel like it just made me approach the collages a little bit differently than I would say I approach a lot of my older ones, which is a lot of my older works I tend to be, I kind of like will spend a lot more time on a layer and like sitting there and really like thinking if I want the layer. And I think with these ones, it was like a little more like completing it, and then I erred more on the side of adding something on top of something than like sitting here and like obsessing over whether this is going to be like the perfect thing. Like I am more like, okay, if this isn't working, I'm going to just cover it up with like another image or something, or like with a shape. So that that's been obviously really, it definitely just changed. It's not usually the way that I work. So that's been good. And also, I mean, just the locality of having this so close to my house has been really nice. Like this is like a less than a 10-minute walk from my house. So that's like, you know, I feel like that's really nice. It's not as daunting as like trying to go to like the other side of the city to go work. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely been like, I feel super like supported, and I feel like that's been, you know, I think that shows in my work as well.
Thanks, Edward. I think that's so important, not only from the perspective of rising marginalized voices in art, you know, in contemporary, excuse me, culture, but I also feel like it's uniquely important in Alston Brighton where a lot of artist spaces are disappearing, right? I mean, one of the challenges that I think many of us experienced was the need to sort of like constrain ourselves to our bedrooms, our kitchen tables, our living rooms, or whatever to make art during this time. There are some galleries that are open. There are some studios that are open, but I do know that just in Somerville, where we are, probably 2 or 3 artist spaces are going to be closing down in the year ahead. And that is happening across the city. And so not only are we talking about building inclusive artist spaces, we just need artist spaces, period. And I hope that we can still continue to find ways to work with developers and other partners to make underutilized space available to artists. And one of the challenges there is there's no stability in that. So then we need to move beyond using temporary spaces. 30 days, great, hustle, go do something, right? But really what's ideal is you've got your practice set up like a small business and you're able to project 5-10 years out of solid work in progress. And that's really becoming more and more difficult to do, I think, here in Allston Brighton. I don't know if that's your experience. How do you see yourself working in 5 years if you're successful as a working artist, as a teacher, as an art professional? What kind of situation is ideal for you 5 years from now as a young and emerging professional?
Yeah, so I mean, I would definitely say that to echo that, I think with Alston, there is like, you know, there kind of is like a crisis in terms of artists right now. The Great Scott closed, which was like a really popular venue that would host a lot of underground music bands. And so the Alston art community is like kind of reeling from that still. And so I think that it's good to have spaces or more spaces come where people can actually make work. And, you know, so that's like really good. And I guess like in 5 years, I mean, ideally I would like to be like teaching at the college level. Like I'd like to be a professor. That would be ideal, but hopefully I mean, the thing with me, I guess, is like, I'm very motivated. I'm not someone that's like sluggish in terms of my art. Like I can guarantee you in 5 years, I'm still going to be making art. Hopefully I've gained a huge recognition and I'm like super famous. That would be awesome. But if not, I'm still going to make it because I just enjoy doing it. And I think for me, it's like a healing process and a form of self-expression. And, you know, so I always want to get better and keep making, you know, but it'd be nice if also there was some other like, you know, returns for that. But I think that in 5 years, I'm more focused on wanting to be a teacher and be able to educate and help young artists find their voice and become great artists as well.
Yeah, right on. Well, I wish you every success in that. We want to be here to support you long-term as well. Any closing questions here? Do we have any coming in? I'm going to ask off camera, Alicia, if we've gotten any YouTube questions coming in yet? No? All right. How about with this group here on Zoom? I see a couple of Asylum members, MJ and Nathan. Huda, welcome. Any more questions for Edward before we wrap up for the evening? Anybody need that definition of maximalism one more time? Pop quiz.
Oh yeah, actually also, one thing I'm just realizing I didn't really get a chance to explain the title. I don't know if I did, but or at least what fractal landscape and why I chose to use that name. But if you're not familiar with a fractal landscape, it's like a computer generated image. So it's like they use algorithms to kind of, and fractal algorithms to create images that appear like mountainscapes or forests. And so it's like these pictures of nature, but they're actually like not based in any real reference. Like it's using like math and that's it. And so it was kind of like the way that, I don't know, I just found myself really interested in that notion and then like this idea of like trying to understand nature through science or trying to understand randomness through science. But I also felt like, I don't know, fractal landscape pictures like terrify me slightly. Like they just look really weird. Like there's something unsettling about it. And so I felt like that would be perfect for the title, because especially The Secret Garden, because I imagined like this beautiful landscape, but it's something that's actually artificial, and it's like this mechanical kind of process. So that was the specific choice for the series.
Let me build on that and ask you about, as somebody who's looking for a college professorship, and you'll be influencing sort of the next generation of young artists here, I'm seeing a lot more AI-driven art these days, portraiture, folks taking landscape and applying AI to sort of like give a painting a Van Gogh feel or something like this. I know that appropriation is something that has really come of age, if you will, from the moderns, the surrealists, but now even more, we've moved past that ready-made kind of concept into a world where so much is available and accessible that we haven't necessarily created originally, and yet we're combining with other things in new ways to create new forms, new ideas, new expressions. What's your sense of what AI can contribute to that legacy? Are you excited about sort of the role of AI in essentially one of the most fundamental human practices? Do you see reasons for caution or concern? How would you guide a young person to approach AI in their art today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI is, I find it to be really interesting. I mean, it's like, it's several of the artworks, like I can't remember the specific Instagram name right now, but there is like an actual, I follow an art page that's literally all just computer generated artworks, and that they actually like auction and stuff. So I am interested in that potential. And like, I don't know, I think that especially when it comes to art, like I'm not remotely concerned that like an AI is gonna like take the place of an artist. I think that art especially is like so deeply critical and has become so like revelatory, or like revels in its own concepts, that I think that, I mean, anyone could go, like a lot of people could just go make like an office painting. So like if the computer is generating the office painting or whatever, then so be it. But I actually find it to be like exciting, because I think that it presents like a different way of working. I mean, it could just be another tool, like I can imagine like artists who are going to be using AI to like create an avant-garde film that scrambles a bunch of different frames together or something. I mean, I think that there can be like a real benefit to having that ease, and things like AI and like computer learning and that kind of stuff has actually assisted, especially in video already. I mean, we're seeing like Premiere Pro has like tracking features, like head tracking features that actually make your life a lot easier. So, I mean, I think that those things are exciting, but also at the same time, I am hesitant and a little bit, I'm not like completely just going to embrace it, because I think that, of course, with all digital work, it's made by humans. And so it could be open to the same type of downfalls that we have in terms of like something like it being like racist or ableist or something. And I think that I guess I'm hesitant about the idea that AI is neutral, because I don't think it is neutral. I think that it has a lot of potential, but I think that we need to be constantly aware that it's not neutral and that it's being created by people and affected by that.
I love that idea of not being neutral. I think we have to be especially careful. Like, one of the things I appreciate is that the artist is responsible for their work, for their outcome, right? There was recently, I think, a piece of artwork that sold online for something like, I'm going to say like 600,000, maybe 650,000 dollars worth of NFT. It was released as a non-fungible, is that right? Non-fungible
Token.
Token, yeah. Thank you. So clearly people are paying attention to sort of AI-driven art. And yet, when you zoomed into the individual pictures that composed this larger work that had sold well, a lot of it was racist. A lot of it was narrow-minded. It was pejorative to different groups of people. And the tech world that is driving this is really libertarian. And what I value about artists is, at the end of the day, we're accountable for our voice, for the meaning that we give to things, even if it's our mutt in a ready-made urinal, right? I think that somebody like Marcel Duchamp would defend his position. He would state it. And one of the things that I worry about is when we begin to insert manipulatives like AI into the process, we don't have to be as responsible for it. And I wonder, especially for someone coming from queer art perspective, how you view that relationship to authorship and accountability in a world that is cracking wide open.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the AI and authorship is really interesting. I mean, it reminds me of like that Twitter bot that there was like, I think there's like some Twitter bot person that they made. And I think within 3 days, it had already become like a right wing and was like super anti-Semitic and stuff like that. So I think that it is obviously daunting. And I think that it becomes a little bit about like who made it, right? I mean, there's a little bit of accountability, but it's not as easy to target because it's like someone can just say, oh, it's just the AI that did it, you know, rather than that. But I guess, I don't know, it's still like, then it's going to be like, okay, well then the blame might get shifted to like the galleries that are representing and showing this artwork that. So I mean, it's a sticky mess, I think, in terms of that. With NFTs, I am like vehemently like not into those, and I think that I've read so many things about how bad they are for the earth. So I don't think that I'll ever be getting into NFTs anytime soon. I actually feel like they're going to fall out of favor pretty quickly, and they're going to it's going to probably not last very long, I can imagine. So
All right, so I don't see any more questions coming in. We can wrap up here pretty soon. One more question for you. Robert Rauschenberg once stated that he worked in collage because it was the one way of composing an image that he understood that was most akin to how we perceive the world around us, fragments, impressions, bits and pieces, and then our mind sort of filters them, puts them together. If you had to summarize sort of like why you love the collage medium, how would you summarize that? Why do you love the collage medium, Edward?
I definitely feel like, I would say it's the notion that something is being used for something it was not created for, or like the idea of repurposing something or pushing something into something it's not made for. I feel like that fundamental idea like really pushes me, and I'm so interested in that. That's also why I guess like I'm interested in like randomization or in like in that element of stuff. So I feel like, yeah, I don't know. That's just, it's an interesting question, but yeah.
All right, well, we will leave it there with a huge thanks to everybody who joined us. Unless folks want to, are shy about adding questions in chat and you want to do a question via your microphone, but feel free to throw your cameras on. This is an evening to celebrate Edward. Say hi, faces and eyes, add sparkle. So feel free to say hi. There we go. What's up, Missy? Say hi, Edward. You got friends up there.
Hi, Missy. Yeah, I just wanted to say again, thank you to Artisans Asylum for supporting me and for supporting my practice and also supporting Alston artists.
It's been a pleasure. You're so welcome. And we'll wrap up. I just want to make sure that folks know our next artist in residence is Daniel Callahan. He is you can look him up at danielcallahan.com. He's a dancer, multimedia artist. The next level here, I think, is to be able to bring you, Edward, into collaboration with someone like Daniel or the artist Ken or Troy, who was here on the last one. We don't have that time and space right now, but I hope as we make our transition to our new home and become part of the Alston Brighton community, not only will we be able to support one-on-one creativity and making through the arts, but also collaboration, foster now the intermingling of narratives, the interconnection of processes to really create something new forms of art, new forms of expression, and new narratives. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Missy, for all the support. You've been great. And good night.